Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this. A person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Heroes in Grief podcast. I'm here with Liz Wolczko. All right. Did I say it right? Oh, yeah. So if you look at the spelling, you'll know why I said that. All right. So everybody, so you can laugh at me out there. Anyways, good to have you with us today. And we're in a conversation about Liz and what she does. So I'm just going to let her start with that. Liz, I like to have people share their grief story so that the listeners can identify with so many things. Even when you hear a grief story that's not the same, you still tend to get things out of it, you know? So if you don't mind, do you mind sharing your grief story? And maybe I see that, you're a bereaved mom, sibling, and daughter. And I'm similar, actually. And you're also a certified grief educator, which I am too. And I also worked at hospice for 3.5 years, and you're a hospice worker. If you wouldn't mind, share with us what you would like to, what you're comfortable with, and we'd love to hear about you.
Tom, thanks so much for having me, and I'm so excited to be here. I have a long grief history, so I will try not to overspeak. My journey started when I was 19. My oldest brother was killed in a car accident, and he was 24. And I have another brother who was 22 and a sister who was 9. And my parents had a very tough time dealing with it, as we all did. Mm-hmm. My other brother went back to college, so he escaped the situation. And my parents struggled with, each one of them had their own way of grieving, and I was kind of caught in the middle. So I tried to appease them both. And then by some miracle, my mother was reading an article. We lived right outside of D.C. at the time. She read an article in the Washington Post about a new support group that was starting called Compassionate Friends. Mm-hmm. So we're talking almost 51 years ago.
Wow.
And it interested her, so she decided to go to a meeting. And by some miracle, again, my father went with her because my father was not a talker. And it began to heal them. I mean, they went for several meetings, and then after a while, my dad kind of backed off, but my mom stayed, and family started kind of calming down. And about not quite a year after that, neighbors of ours came to my mom and said, her name was Janet, she was in her 40s, and she had 4 kids, oldest being 13, youngest being 9 months. She found out she had cancer, and she had just lost both her parents in a car accident. And she needed help taking care of her kids while she underwent chemo, and I was home from college. I didn't go back to college yet. So I went down and I started helping out at that house, and I spent 4 years of my life helping her out while she underwent chemo and dealt with her cancer. And what I learned from this woman during those 4 years shaped my life. She taught me how to go through hell with a smile on her face. And it was a real smile. It wasn't a fake smile, because she always looked for the positive in anything that was going on in her life. And she told me that every night before she went to bed, she found 3 things to be grateful for each day, no matter how bad the day. And I started doing the same thing. And in the long run, it came to help me a lot too. But unfortunately, Janet's cancer came out of remission, and she had put research together about this new concept back then, again, over 50 years ago, called hospice. And at that time, there were only 2 other hospices in this country. And she worked with Dame Cicely Saunders, who was the creator of hospice in England, and with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She had many conversations with both of them, and she researched all sorts of things. And she went to her doctors, and she said, here's a concept I want you to look at, and this is how I'm going to die, and you're going to help me do it. And they said, I don't think so. And she said, oh, I know so. And by God, she got them to do it. So she died at home with her family surrounding her. But before she died, she gave all this research to my mom, who was at the time 50 and had been an at-home mom all her adult life. And she said to my mom, Sally, go create a hospice in my memory so others can die as I'm going to. And my mom said to me, you in? I said, I'm in. And we did. We created the first hospice in Maryland in 1979. It was the 3rd hospice in the country. And she was the administrator. I was her administrative assistant. It's still a thriving hospice today in Rockville, Maryland, servicing over 50,000 families at this point. And the first 10 years of existence, they had their offices in our church, an Episcopal church in Maryland. But I left a year and a half in. My ex-husband and I moved up here to New Hampshire, where I also helped 2 hospices here in New Hampshire get started. And then I had my daughter, so I became an at-home mom. During that time, there were a lot of ups and downs in my life, because grief isn't just about the death of a loved one. I went through the grief of losing my marriage, my home, my car, my insurance, everything. And in the process, I was dealing with Crohn's disease and almost on my deathbed myself. But because of the love and support I had from my family and from a very wonderful man I met in 1992, his name is Peter Wolczko, and he stood by my side through 8 surgeries and many hospitalizations. He was a great dad to my daughter, Joana. And, you know, I survived all of that. And then I had a terrible burn accident where I spent 3 months at Mass General's burn unit, having skin grafts done on my left leg, being told I'd never walk again. But again, because of all the love and support I had from my family, from my church family, from my friends, I came back from that too. And I started working for a hospice again. I became a volunteer coordinator for a hospice here in Nashua, New Hampshire. And I actually got to work with a high school. And it was a Christian high school, so it was a small private high school. I started working with them in their freshman year, having them create something that one of the other volunteer coordinators from my hospice, there were 26 offices of my hospice, and her volunteer created this thing called a chart of life, which was actually a scrapbook on the wall, so that when a volunteer, a medical worker would walk into a patient's room who had Alzheimer's or dementia, they could know something about this patient. instead of just seeing this person who didn't communicate or know anything. And usually when they would see pictures of their life, they would talk when they wouldn't be verbal before. So these kids in the high school started creating them for us, and they did amazing work. And then the next year, some of them came. There's only like 25 kids in the class. Half of them came to me and said they wanted to be volunteers. Really, they wanted to go in and see patients. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So they took my volunteer training. They started seeing patients. And I followed them through the rest of high school. And at their graduation, the chancellor asked me to come speak to them and to the parents. And I told them these were unbelievable young people and that they were going to go far, but that they had the biggest hearts I've ever met. And it was because of being with them that for a long time I've dreamed about talking to high school and college students about grief and death and dying. And I used to introduce myself each year to their volunteer community by saying to them, how many people in this room are dying? And of course I'd raise my hand and I would look around and go, well, everybody should have their hand raised because nobody lives forever.
Right.
So someday all of you are going to have to deal with death of a loved one or a pet or a relationship or so many things. They lined up at my booth to sign up to be my volunteer. So they're itching to learn. So while I was working for Beacon Hospice, my sister-in-law was diagnosed with cancer, and she ended up not surviving, but the very hospice, she lived in Maryland, my brother and sister-in-law lived in Maryland. The very hospice my mother and I created was the hospice that took care of her. So it's kind of full circle. And that was in May of 2008. And little did I know that 3 months later, I would have the worst time of my life, even with all the other things that had gone on. My daughter was 26 years old, engaged to be married, and she woke up on a Sunday morning with a swollen, painful, discolored leg. And they stopped at the hospital after church, and they did a few tests, but they did not have an ultrasound technician on call on a Sunday in this little hospital. So instead of admitting her and keeping her till they did, they sent her home. She had a blood clot, and it blew. And her fiance found her on their bed when she didn't respond to his phone calls. I talked to her about 2 hours before she died, because it was actually her father's birthday, and he had died 8 months before her from cancer, and she had taken care of him for 3 months. And I was on my way home when I got the phone call from her neighbor that they were taking her to the hospital. He didn't tell me that she was gone. And I had the horrific phone call on our way to the hospital. My husband met me at home. We went on to the hospital. And this doctor, I answered it, and this doctor said, is this Mrs. Wolczko? Because most people can't pronounce my name. I said, yes. She goes, well, this is Dr. So-and-so. I don't remember her name. I just wanted you to know we did everything you could. Your daughter's dead. I said,
my gosh.
Excuse me? She said, yeah, your daughter's gone. And I started screaming, and then she goes, oh, are you all driving? Maybe you should pull over now. Ugh. And that's how I heard about the death of my Joana.
So sorry.
Thank you. I know you know the pain. I was reeling for a while. My family again surrounded me. My sister came up and took care of me. My parents were in a nursing home at that point. So the night of my daughter's beautiful funeral, my mother called me and we chatted, knowing that she would know this whole journey since she'd been through it herself. And she said to me before we hung up, she said, you have to promise me you'll go find a compassionate friends group. They will be the people that will help you. And I said, okay, Mom, I promise I will. And then she said, don't want you and your sister to worry, but they're taking me to the hospital tomorrow because they want to look at my heart. But I'm okay. I said, all right, we won't worry. The next day, my sister walks back in the house after dropping off her rental car to inform me that my mother had a stroke. So my poor sister had to leave me because I said, I can't go, and nobody wants you to go. You got to stay home. My mother died 3 days later.
Oh, my gosh.
So here I'd lost my sister-in-law, my daughter, and my mother within 3 months. And I thought, how do I come back from this? Well, a month after that, I did what my mother made me promise I would. I walked into the room of the Manchester Compassionate Friends chapter. And that's what got me through that first year at least, especially the first holiday, and being in a room with a bunch of people who knew what I was feeling, and being told I'm normal and, I'm not losing my mind, and not wanting to be here anymore was a common feeling. And just that knowledge that other people, it wasn't something just I was going through. Maybe having 3 deaths happen in 3 months, yeah, maybe that they didn't go through that, but they certainly knew my pain. Mm-hmm. And I have become dear friends with some of these people because it's now been 16 years since my daughter and my mom and my sister-in-law have died. And so many wonderful things have happened from those 16 years. I worked for the hospice for several more years, and then I decided it was time to move on. And I started doing some other things, but I kept working with Compassionate Friends. I became a facilitator. And then in 2014, I think, they decided we needed a chapter in Manadnock area of New Hampshire, which is about an hour from here. So I helped create that chapter, and I was the treasurer for them for 3 years. And then I came back to being a facilitator here. And I retired, and I just started doing things to honor my daughter as much as I could. And a very dear friend of mine, the first spring after Joana died, she put a garden in my front yard. I've never gardened a day in my life. And I thought, and it was beautiful, but it was in Joana's memory. So the next year, she told me how to take care of it. And the third year, she went, now you're on your own. I now have 8 garden beds and lots of plants. And of course, 2 beautiful butterfly bushes in Joana's honor and memory. But the other thing that happened, other than having amazing family and friends, Joana was my only child. And I was just so desperate for grandchildren and all of that, which I won't ever have. But as I said, Joana was engaged. And the week after she died, I said to her fiance, Nathan is his name, we understand if you have to move on. We want you to move on. And, we know that being around us must be really hard. And he said to me, Tom, what are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere. You're my family. I love you.
That is so wonderful. That's great.
Isn't it? 16 years later, he's our son. And 10 years ago, he married a friend of Joana's. Nathan had known her for a while before he met Joana because he knew her ex-husband. And Joana loved her. Her name is Haley. And Joana and Haley were like sisters because they lived next door to each other. And we were part of the wedding, and we couldn't have been happier because I said to Nathan, you could have found somebody who didn't know Joana, and she would have said, be done with them. That's weird. He said, I never would have done that to you. And Haley now has lost both her parents, and she has told us, you are my only parents now. So these young people who live an hour from us come and spend every holiday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays with us. Because they love us and we love them, as do Joana's 2 best friends, Nicole and Brenda. So I have 4 kids that I wouldn't have had. Mm-hmm. The gift that Joana gave me was those 4 kids.
Wow.
And she gave me the gift of knowing that I could share her with people. I've had many people tell me that they never met Joana, but they say, gosh, I feel like I know her. Because I've always believed that at least I wanted to keep her memory alive. I have never been afraid to talk about her. And I've never had anybody say to me, Liz, aren't you over it yet? What's wrong with you? Why are you still talking about her? She's been gone for 16 years. No, everybody knows that I'm going to talk about her. So I believe that's a choice that we make. And I watched how my parents suffered for so long, and I decided I wasn't going to do it that way. But I have to admit, I am blessed because I have such amazing people around me. And I have lots of people around me, and I know that that's not the common. That's a rarity, but I've worked at it. I decided to show people that you can go through hell and come back from it if you work at it enough. And to this day, Tom, I still, every night, write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And I even did it the night Joana died. And I look back at it and I see how far I've come. So now, after taking the Grief Educator program, and with all the knowledge I had about grief, and I started David's class, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to learn much. Boy, did I learn a lot.
Yeah.
And then I went on to work with Rachel Hanfling to be a better public speaker. And I'm also now with Compassionate Friends. They've asked me to be a corporate liaison. So I am now starting to go into companies in the area and talking to them about Compassionate Friends and what Compassionate Friends could do for them should they have an employee that loses a child, a sibling, or a grandchild, and how we can support them in a way so that they can be able to come back to work at some point or help them. And what we'd like from them is some sort of financial support. Because Compassionate Friends is not getting the financial support that they really should be getting. They did some research and found out other nonprofits were getting millions of dollars, and Compassionate Friends was not. So I'm honored they asked me, and it's all because I did a video for them for their conference last year about my journey with Compassionate Friends. So I've done a couple speaking engagements at a couple churches, and I'm trying to get my foot in the door in some high schools and colleges, because I truly believe they're the ones that could help us turn our society from being grief denying to grief accepting. So, and being with Rachel has helped me find the confidence to not be afraid to go out and talk to people, and when I do, to not stand there and read what I'm going to say. That's the biggest thing. And I've been able to do that the past couple presentations I've done, is not read it. And just like today, I'm not reading anything.
That's right. If today is any indication, you're doing a fantastic job. So don't worry about that at all. You're going to be fine. You answered some of the questions. I was thinking of some as you were talking. And the first one was, I was going to ask you about those 3 things, if you carried those through in the rest of your life, and you answered that. You said, yes, you did, those 3 positive things. The other thing was about Compassionate Friends, and I wanted people to understand what Compassionate Friends is. Can you just give a brief elevator pitch about the organization and what it does and what it's for?
Yeah, it actually was started by a minister over 50 years ago who worked in a hospital and encountered 2 families that had lost their sons. And he was a young minister himself, and he hadn't had much grief experience, so he put them together and saw how much being with another family that had lost a child helped. So chapters, he started putting others together, and word got out. So it was word of mouth that got the chapters going. Back when my brother died, Compassionate Friends was only for parents who'd lost a child. So when I came to Compassionate Friends 16 years ago, I was pleased to learn that it was now also for siblings and grandparents. And basically, it's a group of people who get together that have lost a sibling, a grandchild, or a child. And it's not a therapy group. It's a support group run by volunteers. Most chapters have a steering committee and do a few things here and there to raise money. But they have trainings to train people to be facilitators. But I think Compassionate Friends is one of the biggest organizations helping parents who've lost a child. I know you've worked with another one that I just learned about.
Yeah, helping parents heal. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so great that there's, more organizations like that are coming up now, because we all don't know how to deal with grief. Our society is so, grief illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how David says, unfortunately, we are now the ones having to teach people.
Yeah. And Liz is speaking about David Kessler. That's who.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just like our people to know, the people listening.
Yeah.
Because we take it for granted because we've been through it, and other people through other podcasts might know. But sorry, yeah, it's David Kessler. His site is grief.com if you want to check that out. But I wanted to tell you too that and tell everyone out there, you don't have to just be with one organization. And so if you're looking for help, for instance, when I was doing David Kessler's stuff, I found out about Compassionate Friends through someone spoke on one of his, whether it was a program or one of the Zoom sessions, I don't know. But so I looked up Compassionate Friends and I went online a few times and was in some of the chat rooms and everything. So you can use multiple things. It's okay, everybody, to use as much as you want out there. It's not like a one size fits all here or something like that. So, and you talking about the grief illiterate society, that it's really irking me. I'm starting to, I'm pushing a little now. I've just taken the steps to start moving forward and speaking engagements as well, to start knocking down those doors.
Good.
Yeah, I really have a heart for that. And same thing now, almost exactly what you're doing, but I just was going to do it on the grief side in general, because and I told this story last week on a podcast that I was doing, but I drive during the day and I took a Walmart employee and he had he was a manager and he had a woman who unfortunately came home and found her husband passed away. And I won't say how, because it can be activating for some people, but, and so she's devastated and has been for a long time. And he said, she's not the same. And, nobody knows how to deal with her and everything else. I said, that's exactly what I want to come and help people with is, first of all, help the people around the situation so that they can be better for that person. And that'll make them more comfortable too, and, but
for sure.
Yeah, but you're totally right about the organizations. They just do not, you talked about the funding for Compassionate Friends and things and big organizations. They'll take every other mental health step, but for some reason, grief is always like, oh no, don't come here with that. And it's probably what's needed most, because explain to them, you're losing productivity with this person. You're losing all these different things. And, we really need to keep knocking on those doors. And so I give you a lot of credit for doing that as well. It's so needed. And we will break through that in society for sure. Yeah. Everybody just kind of pushes it aside, and it's harmful.
Yes.
Because that harms the person big time, because they can't deal with their grief.
And when you look at organizations, what do they give you for bereavement?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Now, I was blessed. I worked for a hospice. If anybody was going to understand death, they would.
Yeah.
And they pretty much gave me carte blanche. But I thought after a month I was doing really well, so I went back to work. I was back to work a couple weeks, and as a volunteer coordinator, my office was next to the bereavement coordinator. And one day she had a family in there who had just lost their 98-year-old mother, and they were sobbing uncontrollably. I wanted to pound my fist on the wall and say, what are you crying about? I just lost my 26-year-old daughter. I didn't do it. But I went to my boss the next day and I said, I think I came back to work too soon.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the family medical leave. And he said to me, no, I can't let you do that. And I went, it's the law. You have to. He goes, Liz, I don't want you not to be paid. Don't you have short-term disability? Do it that way. And that's the kind of company I worked for.
Yeah.
So again, I was blessed and lucky. But anybody who knows me, when there's a problem or something coming up with grief, who do they call? They call Liz, because they know Liz has gone through all of this and come out on the other side.
Yeah. Incredible story, Liz. Yeah. And yes, you were the definition of the name of this podcast, whether you believe it or not. But so I wanted to ask you something else too, because I love to say their names. So what was your brother's name?
My brother's name was John.
John. And you did say your daughter's name, Joana?
It was Joana.
Joana.
Yes, but it was spelled differently. I named her after my best friend, who is Lithuanian, and the Lithuanian spelling is Joana. And she was forever having to correct her name. She said I cursed her.
Yeah, everybody else thinks.
I probably did, but, and I feel her so often. And the nice thing is my husband, Peter, who is a saint from heaven, my mother actually called him Saint Peter because he didn't leave me on her doorstep. He just has been so wonderful. Joana was like his daughter, and it was his pain too. And because we've been able to do it together, we talk about Joana all the time. We talk about our parents, and he lost a brother. And so we talk about our brothers, not every day, but we're not afraid to. Mm-hmm. And communication, especially in a marriage, is just so paramount. And I'm blessed. I have a husband that's willing to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a big issue too with couples, of course. It can, it can pull you together or take you down pretty much is the way it goes. So that's important for sure. Yeah, our hospice work. I was a hospice spiritual care director for 3.5 years. And
you were?
Yeah. So incredible stuff with
thank
that.
You. Just thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I had no idea that you were at the forefront of so many things there with hospice, and incredible story.
Well, it was all because of my friend Janet.
Yeah. What Janet did. I
actually finally got, it's called Montgomery Hospice. That's the name of the hospice in Montgomery County, Maryland. They now have her picture and my mom's picture on the wall with a proclamation giving them credit for creating Montgomery Hospice. For a long time, they had the story wrong. And it took me a while to get them I had to prove it to them, but I proved it, that we were really the beginning. So that took me time, but it's something I'm very proud of because I think they needed to be honored.
Yeah, hospice, people should, there's a lot of misconceptions about hospice too. One of the biggest things I heard from people while I worked at hospice was that we should have come to you sooner. And so I want to encourage people out there to, if you're even thinking about it, call your local hospice and talk to them because they have a lot of resources that help you and not just your sick family member, but they help you too. And that's a huge thing to have that support around you and have someone who can answer your questions for you and all of that. And there's spiritual care support, there's social work support, there's bereavement support afterwards. And there's, of course, medical support there, too. So
let me just say one thing here. Hospice was never meant to be for the last couple weeks of life. Mm-hmm. It was created to be even like 6 months before because of all the resources that are there for hospice. And people are always so surprised when they hear, oh, I thought it was just for the last week or two.
Yep.
No. It never was meant to be that way.
Right. And then you hear, that's the biggest thing I took out of ever working in hospice was that statement right there. We should have called you sooner. And it happened all the while I was working there too. Same thing. So, good stuff. I had one other question for you. I don't know, skip my mind, but anyways.
As my father always said, must have been a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost my dad about seven years ago. But he had Alzheimer's and he was 96, and I was with him the day he died, and Peter was with him when he died. And he had hospice too, and the very hospice I worked with for a while. So, I mean, it's for me, it's always been full circle.
Yeah. I did a wedding in the hospice house that I was working at. A
Did you?
young girl came in, and she was supposed to get married anyways. But her cancer took a turn, and she started getting very bad very quick. And so they arranged she had to come into the hospice facility that we have an inpatient unit, and they wanted to still get married. And she literally probably only had days to go. And so
Aw.
we had a ceremony and family members and reception, everything else in the hospice house. And I was
Oh,
honored to be able to perform that wedding.
oh,
So yeah, it was incredible.
those are the kind of heart stories I love to hear.
Oh, they're great stories and great things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very precious, amazing
Mm,
stuff. Yeah. But I am so sorry for all your losses, and you have given people a lot of encouragement and inspiration with how you've worked through it, how you've moved through it. Definitely not easy. I know it's not easy for you still at times. It's
no.
the grief is always going to be there. There's always hurt and pain. We move on, and it changes. As
Mm,
David always says, we learn to live with more love than pain, right? And
yep, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And it's not something I did alone.
yeah.
So if you're out there doing it alone, reach out, because I guarantee you, if you reach out to someone that you trust and know, being there with somebody is so important. Don't hide in your grief. There's lots of us out here that would be willing to listen.
Yep, that's what we're trying to do, is get that word out that we're here because of
Hmm.
what we talked about with society squelching it all the time, trying to push it away. They don't understand. They don't know how to deal with it. We're not sitting here trying to point fingers at anybody. We're just trying to help educate everybody about how it can be better done. So that's what it's all
Yes.
about. So
Well, I thank you for starting this podcast. I think it's fabulous, and I'm proud of you for jumping in and doing it.
thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah, we met online. I think I can't remember exactly where it was, but I know that you did message me and showed interest right away, and I appreciate that. As I said in my testimonial one last week, that I feel I was given the idea for the podcast. That
I believe
the
you.
spirit guides and things, that I was directed to do it, and the name came from them too, which I thought was awesome. I didn't think the name was great in the beginning, and then as I said in the intro to the podcast, I looked up the definition, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, that really, it fits perfectly. So that's where
It does.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
just
Yep.
courageous people, and doing honorable things, and that's what it's all about. We're not here to puff up anybody or anything. It's just trying to get help
No.
out to everybody. We'll definitely have the links to everything that we talked about here, Compassionate Friends and all those things, for people to find out. I did find out too, when I looked up Compassionate Friends here, that there's none right in the Buffalo area. There's south of Buffalo, maybe about 50 miles away. There's one, and one in Rochester, which is an hour and a half away, but there was no chapter in Buffalo at all. So
Oh,
yeah, that was,
that always makes me sad. Actually, there's only two here in New Hampshire.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there was four, and now there's two.
yeah.
And part of it has to do with funding, which is why I'm pounding the pavement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's people out there who need to know about it too, and maybe could become those people. So we'll get that out to
Yep.
them too. So, Liz, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Wolczko, Lynn Wolczko. It said it's is
I'm very proud of
well,
you.
thank you. Is it a Polish name?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Okay.
Peter's dad was in the Polish army and escaped into France and met Peter's mom. She was a Scottish nurse in a French hospital, and the rest, they say, is history. So his mom always had her Scottish brogue, and I unfortunately never met Peter's dad. He died before I met Peter. But yeah, we went to Scotland about 8 years ago and found the house that he grew up in. He didn't come until he was 6 years old to the United States. He came through Ellis Island.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
but he's an amazing guy, and everybody who knows him thinks he's pretty amazing. And I'm very blessed.
he
There's no
does.
question. And this, even with all the hardships, I've chosen to look at the blessings as much as I can.
Yep. And it is a choice. It's a choice like every day when you get up. Do you want to be happy or you want to be grumpy? So I always told.
And I wake up grumpy sometimes. I'm not perfect. And I have my bad days. I still hate August 6th, which is her anniversary. And we still celebrate her birthday. And, I'll hear a song and it'll hit me hard. But that means I loved her. That means I still care about her.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to stop.
Yep. In a strange way, the pain can make you feel alive again, more alive again, or whatever, just in that realm anyways. Yep. But Peter sounds like an amazing man, and I'm so happy that you have him. That is incredible.
Me too.
That's great. So
I tell everybody this marriage is till death do us part, because if he leaves, he's dead. And he says, well, what am I supposed to do if you leave me? I said, I'm not that stupid. I know a good one when I have it.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. And you can keep that or cut it out.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Liz, thanks again so much. People, thank you for listening again out there. And I hope you like it. I'm kind of changing the way I'm doing the podcast and just having conversation with people and just, you get the raw conversation pretty much. And I hope you enjoy that. And people have told me it sounds relaxed to them, and I want it to be, so it's easy to listen to and everything. So, but man, there's a lot to digest from your story. I'm going to listen again and pick that out of there. So I appreciate it. And I'm sure other people will too. Liz, thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks for asking me. It's been a real privilege and an honor. And I like I said, I so thank you for doing this and getting the word out for more people. And you can just put my email address in there if that's how and I'm on Instagram and Facebook with my name. So anybody wants to reach out to me, they're welcome to. We will do that. Thank you so much. I appreciate your availability with all of that. That's fantastic. All right. Thank you, Liz. What did you have? I'm sure we'll run into each other again at some point. Absolutely. We'll keep tabs. All right. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Have a great night. Okay. Bye now. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.